Welcome to Work Inspired. I'm Kimberly Sullivan. Today we're interviewing Chris Keller, the design director at IA. We're going to be talking about how to create workspaces that involve empathy, community, flexibility, and wellness, all while trying to balance in technology, authenticity, and evolving work styles. Work Inspired starts right now. Thank you, Chris, for being here today. We ask every guest one question to start off. What is your professional story?
I'm trying to think about how far to go back, but I have an architecture degree from Iowa State.
Okay.
And interiors has always been a conscious decision. I didn't do architecture, core and shell. I've done a lot of hospitality, a lot of workplace. I've done some higher ed. I've done residential. I've done retail. So I've gotten my grubby little hands in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for that because I feel like it just gives me a few filters through which to look at design problems. I come from a weird family. My grandmother was any sort of art, fashion, design. She was a guru. She could draw, she could paint, she could sculpt. She had great fashion sense. The furniture that she had was fantastic. She owned a children's specialty store, and even the chairs in there were designer chairs, but of a mini version. So it was all around. And then my grandfather was a doctor. So there's a staunch pragmatism there. So I'm kind of this jumbled mess of all that stuff. But my grandmother used to make my grandfather hire interior designers to do his medical practice offices because she said, people are not there generally for a fun reason. So you want them to be as comfortable as they can be. So I've got a bunch of old furniture that's like pretty cool that's in my house because of all of that.
Yeah.
But it's
What's
sort of
your favorite piece out of all that?
I have a desk and a credenza that was in my grandfather's office at one time. And there's a rumor that it is like a Saarinen piece.
Ooh.
We can't find any tags or anything on it, but it's kind of amazing.
Very cool.
So I've been carting that around with me wherever I've moved. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so grandparents were a big influence on your life.
Yeah.
How did you get to IA?
It's an interesting story, but as I've gone on in my career, I've realized that storytelling, designing for brand, and office culture are probably the three biggest things that I look for when I want to do design work. So their reputation is pretty stellar for those kinds of things. They have an amazing, positive, helpful, collaborative culture. People know who they are. They're associated with, I should say we now, actually, but we are associated with being involved in some of the larger, more significant projects in the last 10 years or so. So that's what brought me there, is I just felt like the opportunities for the work would be really good and let me sort of flex the design muscle. But the other interesting thing about IA Chicago is we only really do workplace interiors, right? So other firms do other things, but that's where we've kept our focus. Other offices do other things, but here in Chicago, that's what we do. And there's environmental and graphic design included in our office. So getting down to storytelling and drilling into culture and thinking about real experience consistently throughout a space is something that we have at our disposal. I can throw a football and I don't have a great arm and hit the EGD principle, and we can have conversations about the best way to do things. So it's a really fun process. It's a little bit different and a little more granular, and you dig deeper, I think. So
that has to make it very special, right? From some of the other experiences out there, especially for the customers you guys deal with. Are there other things that make it special?
The culture is awesome. The location is right next to the parking garage, which is great. So
that's big in Chicago.
Yeah, it is. But I just feel like walking in there every day, you're just surrounded by people who are positive and helpful. And I think that's great for designers. And I think we sort of shed the me in favor of the we, which is very refreshing because at the end of the day, we all get the same photos and we all put them in our portfolios or show our families or, look at what I've done, put them on the refrigerator, whatever you want to do. But it really truly is a much more collaborative and helpful culture. And I think that's a really good thing, particularly when you get on to where I am in my career. I don't want to do everything. And I want to be able to help teach the next generation. As I look back on my career, there have been times where I thought, man, I really could have used a mentor. I really could have used more help. I really could have used this trial by fire thing is great, but it starts to hurt a little bit when it burns you. So if we had a bit more mentorship, and I think they're really focused on that with some of the programs that we have and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a pretty special place to be.
Well, I would say it's one of the coolest buildings, right?
Yeah.
You get inspired just walking in and going up and then seeing the lake.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. So,
Yeah.
We kind of already stumbled into this, but it sounds like what would be valuable in your career, what has been, is mentorship. Can you lean into that a bit more?
I remember architecture school, and I remember how stereotypically brutal it was. And I found it to be at times more punitive than it was educational. I try to lead with empathy. That's one of my core words. And I feel like you get so much more out of somebody when it's apparent that you're trying to help them and help them grow, not just give them tasks to do. That's fine to learn some of the more technical things, but it really doesn't do much for them as they get on in their career, and it's their responsibility to train others. We're really only training our replacements, right? So I think that having a more empathetic stance is something that I learned that I would have really liked to have had. I'm grateful for my experiences. I just wish I would have had more of the kind of culture that we have at IA, because I think I wonder where I'd be now. Like, I wonder how much more I would know, or how much more capable I would be to help other people. So it's something that it was conspicuous a bit by its absence, I guess I would say. But I grew up in a different generation. The industry just didn't work that way.
Sure.
So we're not casting aspersions other than we're learning as time goes on how much more important that is.
Can you tell me something that you're looking forward to in the next 12 months?
We have some pretty interesting projects that are underway right now and sort of in that budgeting approval process. But what they are different takes on different business lines. So for example, we're doing a law firm that is not going to look like a law firm. It's not going to feel like a law firm. We're actually doing two. And the reason that I'm looking forward to those and seeing those manifest themselves is because that process I was talking about earlier, where we do a really deep dive into what people need and want, that's going to be pretty cool to see how it manifests itself. And I think that, all credit to the clients who have said, hey, listen, if this feels like a law firm, we don't think we're successful. This needs to feel like something different. And they really want it to be a reflection of who they are and how they work, and be about the people in the office. I mean, I know that's what we're all designed for, but our mostly, I would say almost anthropological approach to how to do these things, that's going to yield a pretty cool result. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm also, in general, looking forward to the fact that there seems to be much more activity in the market of clients, potential clients looking at space. It may not be as much, and it may be a different approach to it, but the tours and lease renewals and changes and things like that, the activity is ramping up. It just seems interesting that I wonder how many people are waiting for someone else to do something before they feel comfortable doing it, right? And so at that point, you just hope like one person pulls a trigger, and then it's just like the floodgates open. But I think it's coming. I really do think it's coming. So,
well, I think legal's leading the way a bit, especially in Chicagoland, right? They're rethinking space. They're rethinking how to attract talent. They're trying to have people come back in the office and understand the power of mentorship. So what a great segment for you to kind of jump into and work with those customers to design what the future of a space is going to look like. I'd love to see pictures when you're done with it.
Oh, yeah.
If we don't already help you with the furniture.
We're going to, I'm sure they'll be plastered all over as many places as they can be seen, because, that's good for us too, right?
Very cool. What advice do you have for future leaders?
I would say lead with empathy. I think that really we have to remember that our job is, we're not here to impose, we're here to translate. So anytime you can put yourself on the other side of the table and really think about what it's like, that person who may be walking into something and they don't quite understand what it is, or they don't know what it is. One of the things that we run into frequently is that when you deal with clients in a decision-making body, and some of them have much different priorities than other people do, there's a little bit of nervousness there, right? So whatever you can do to manage those expectations and to quell that kind of thing is helpful, and it just instills confidence and it makes things smoother. But it also goes for internally as well. Try to understand your peers, try to understand the way that they're looking at things in terms of how projects run. It's never going to be perfect, but at some point it gives you good practice into realizing that there are other ways of doing things. And that's really what we're supposed to think about, right? Is how to do things differently and better.
Yeah.
So it's just a good philosophy to have.
Absolutely. What encouraging words for someone young coming in the industry trying to figure out how to work with customers. You're right, they are nervous.
Yeah.
And I think something you touched on a little bit ago is that they're very interested in what others are doing and to see someone do it first.
Right.
Do you ever have end users that come in and are really asking that question? What are others doing? And can you take us on spaces? And what did they like and dislike? Where roundtables of getting the same type of groups together could really be something interesting and fun.
I think, so they flat out ask, we want to know what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And the first question is why?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're worrying about you. We're worrying about how you work. We're worrying about your workflow, your culture, your brand, all of those kinds of things. And so we can talk about different ways to handle a philosophy. But I think trying to replicate or duplicate what somebody else is doing, it's not a one size fits all. It doesn't mean we have to rethink everything.
Yeah.
Right? There are standards that if they're the right answer, they're the right answer. And whether it's file drawers per LPA or whether it's square footage for an office or whatever those things are, there are going to be some of those givens. But I think at the end of the day, we owe it to our clients to really make sure that we're doing this for them. We're trying to find the best way for them to work. And I think something that we also try to do is we may know that it's fine now. You may say, oh yeah, this works fine, but could it be better? We ask that question. Could you be doing this better? What is it, even if it's down to the kind of a handle or a pull on a credenza or something, like, is there something that could be better? Because we have the opportunity to do that now. We can change it now. And I think that's important because the default is always, well, it's what we do now and it's just fine.
Yeah.
We're not going to reinvent the wheel. If you say, this is perfect, we don't need to address this, fine, we'll move on. And again, this isn't for us, right? We're just here to help translate for you. We're here to help shepherd you through the process. And if we are the experts about things that have worked well in the past, or if we are the barometer for things that we've seen out in the market that other people are doing that might be a good example, it's our job to stay educated. But we can't just drop that in and say, that's what we're doing. There needs to be a critical analysis that happens with all of that to make sure that we're proposing the right solution.
Well, how do you critically analyze brand culture? How do you get immersed in that to understand what they're trying to achieve?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is understand that these are intended to be workspaces, right? And I think that to remember that, but also understand that work styles have changed. So there's an important part of that process where we have to find a way to understand the types of work styles that would fit into a culture of a client that we really needed to understand. We have to have a philosophy, whether we help them get there or they bring it to us. We have to have a philosophy into which we can kind of sink our teeth and move forward. And then I think it's really about telling a story of how that work is going to happen and the different ways that work can happen. People are much more sensitive to where they work now. You know, when I was coming up, I had a desk and a computer and AutoCAD and a paycheck and some benefits, and I was winning, right? It's much different now. People are working for organizations where they align with the culture, they align with the values. There's a much deeper dive in terms of people investigating for whom they want to work because it's important to them. We have to understand all that and then manifest that self in a built environment, which means telling a story, optimizing workflow, and making sure that productivity is never compromised, all while making it a place where experiences are rich, they're meaningful, they're varied, within the framework of our client, and that they are productive and profitable. And because we're designing workspace.
Yeah. One of the things that you have to design for is a multi-generational group of people, right? Especially in today's now and age. We have big generations that are coming in with big populations. How do you work with the different generations that maybe have a different idea of what work looks like for them?
That's a great question. And this is a really good example of how there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Mm-hmm. And so I think that what we try to focus on is, given all of the pro formas and the running of the numbers and the expansion and all those kinds of things, the best way to do that is to give people a very clear understanding through any degree of change management that what they're going to get is better. I think we have to stop looking at it as different, because I think that's what scares people. Mm-hmm. I think you have to tell them how it's going to be better. For example, you may be losing square footage out of your office, but here's an amenity package that you're going to get. Or you might be in a 6x6 workstation as opposed to an 8x8 that you're used to, but here's something else you're going to get in return. I mean, there just has to be a trade-off where people say, okay, I get it. And I think that, the human condition, people will get used to a lot of things. But if you manage the expectations up front and be relatively transparent, at least informative, if not solicitous with your team, that goes a long way. If people feel like they're heard, then they don't necessarily need to see exactly what they wanted. And so, because sometimes that just doesn't work, right? Yeah. But if you can show what the trade-off is and show how it's either a much nicer place to be, or it's much more productive, or it's a better location, or any of those kinds of things, it goes a long way to help people understand that it's better. Because that's what we're here to do. We got to make it better.
So careful communication on how to highlight things, but also understand that there might be a change that comes up.
Right. And it doesn't negate the concept of creativity, right? Rethinking how things work. So one of these law firms that we're working on, for example, a bit surprising to them, another office in another city had this room that was sort of it was intended to be a large conference room, but it sort of morphed into this library lounge thing. And people were kind of nervous, like, it doesn't feel like a legal culture thing, and in an industry where, your marks of ascension are a private office and then a private office on a window and things like that. They were really surprised at how much it got used, to the point where we're replicating the idea, the notion of it. Finding a creative use and a creative way to give people something else, something different, something better, something more comfortable is a really good way to get beyond that.
Absolutely. Are you finding a lot of people are headed back into the office in Chicagoland? Or is it still a mixture?
It's still a mixture.
Okay.
For example, we have to be in 3 days a week. Mondays and Wednesdays are required. And then you pick one other day to come in. I think what is becoming hard is you may be able to work remotely, but there's the soft set of skills that start to suffer a bit, like learning how to communicate with different kinds of people that are in different roles, that have different priorities. There are those personality traits that when you learn how to talk to one person and how you can work with them is much different than how you talk to and work with somebody else. And that's the sort of condition that we find is suffering. And from experience, it's really hard to sit in a room with an employee who wants to get promoted, and you have to say, well, you need to work on this soft set of skills. And the way to do that is to go where the people are, which is the office. We're very, very careful to mention that, because at some point you're going to be missing a strata of employee type, right? And whatever level of management that is, whatever you want to call it, is different in different industries and different organizations. It's not going to be there. And that's really, really hard. I go in every day
Every day.
I go in every day. It is unusual if I am not there.
Good.
And I do it for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I'm much better when I suit up to go into the game. There's something about psychologically where I'm in the environment that I find myself to be more focused. I find myself to be a little bit faster, and everybody knows where to find me. That's very important too, is to know where to find people. And that's part of my job. People need to be able to find me. But I listen to people. I listen to how they speak. I watch their facial expressions. I understand who they are and how they're working and how they're communicating. And then it's part of my job as a leader to understand what's going to be the most effective for them.
Sure.
And that's my empathy again.
Yeah.
Like empathy is my superpower. So I have to, but that's what I notice.
I love it.
And
we're going to get you a suit
well,
that says Captain Empathy or something on it. I think that's
cool,
awesome. Yeah.
And it needs to be black until they make something darker.
Okay.
Which is kind of ironic relative to what the superpower is.
Yeah.
You'd think it'd be a bright, cheerful color. Anyway.
Empathy comes in a lot of forms.
I know. You're right, it does. We struggle with the policy, right? People don't want to hear a policy and they don't want to lose their staff, which I completely understand. But you've got to be able to let them know that like there's another set of skills other than just your quantitative day-to-day assignments that you have to learn to perfect.
I think a lot of clients are struggling with the same thing, right? They're trying to, they throw around a lot of terms. Earn the commute, office first. How do we get people back, but we don't diminish the ability to have the flexibility that they're looking for? How do you and IA solve for that?
Well, first of all, we have a very talented group of people. We have a very creative group of people that produce beautiful work and make beautiful spaces, and I think that goes a long way. I think our storytelling capabilities, being rooted in concept and staying firm to that, are really good because it's very easy to have a concept and have it get lost through the process in the interest of value engineering or schedule or whatever the case may be. We don't lose that. And that's very important to us. Every presentation still has the concept page. We remind the client and we remind ourselves. It's really easy for us to get in there and lose track of it, right? Because we're too deep and we're too close. But I also think that we have a really good way of making our clients understand that you have to have the story, that you have to have an approach, and there has to be something more than just boxes on a floor plan. But what I think is really interesting is it takes more than just a great design to bring people back to the office. There has to be, it's very important, and we love being creative and we love finding new ways to use space and create new work environments and things like that. But it's also part of the reason why I'm in the office every day. Like we need leadership to set an example about how much better it is to come in here. We need people to see the leaders in the office so that they understand like, well, is that one of the things I need to do to ascend? And it's true. I think we have a really good way of tackling the philosophical design issues, the creativity issues. We are fastidious with our QA/QC. The level of detail that we go to just helps create that environment even more.
Do you have some examples on how you created even subtle nods on how to get people back and get them to interact and be present, right? It could be a big nod or subtle, whatever you prefer.
I think, so the first answer, and it's not going to be an incredibly original one, is the concept of amenities and fighting for what those things are. But I also think that what we do with our amenities packages, we still marry those with work settings, right? This isn't about building a bar with just about building a bar, I should say, with beer taps and kombucha. It's more than that. It is meant to be supportive of the rest of the space. And that doesn't mean it's not important. And it doesn't mean it isn't beautiful. And it doesn't mean it isn't effective. It just means that it is something that is going to support the work that happens there, which the second part of this is very unique and innovative work settings, right? We see phone rooms and we see comfortable furniture and we see all those kinds of things, but we also have lighting in our office. So we marry lighting with acoustics, with aesthetics, with graphics, with architectural detailing, and all of those things that start to create a different set of tools to use. And then we make sure that we are paying attention to AV and communications and things like that, because the AV in our office is great. It's very simple. You walk in, you hit a button.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how great spaces can be, but the only thing that they recognize is like, I can't figure out how to work this thing.
Isn't that the
Right?
worst?
But
Yeah.
it's interesting because you start to think about how the mind works.
Yeah.
You've got this beautiful space and this beautiful room, and all you can think about is how the AV doesn't work as well as it should.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying you should overlook that, but it's very easy for one thing to maybe slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's such a deep dive that we do that, and think about all of it. And it really fits with me because of my hospitality roots, right? Because in hospitality, like there was a period of my life where I was only doing 5-star hotels.
Ooh.
It was so fun. I'm not gonna
That's
lie.
a lot of fun.
You don't have to worry. I didn't have to worry about budget. Are you kidding me?
Oh.
Right?
What
But
was your favorite hotel? Real quick.
that I did or that I've stayed in?
Both. How about?
I did a Hard Rock in Macau,
Ooh.
and I spent a lot of time over there, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. My favorite hotel that I've been in, this is going to sound real trite. It's the Chelsea in New York City.
The Chelsea, New York City. Okay.
They did a beautiful restoration.
Yeah.
And I stayed there, and I had a little 1-bedroom suite. I got upgraded.
Okay.
And I was like, you know what? I could live here.
Oh.
It was a tiny little space, but I was like, yeah, I could do this.
Yeah. Done.
And that, but the idea that people are going to come in and run their hand across the wall or atop the headboard,
Mm-hmm.
or how far away the switch is
Mm-hmm.
on the lamp, or the feeling of the bathroom, and just how the lighting works and how the materials feel and where the hang rods are. There's a level of thought that I don't think you can get past, even in workplace settings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's unique about us, because we think about all that. We talk about all that. And it's amazing because we do it within billable hours. We do it within our staffing. And I was like, that's astonishing to me.
That is.
But that's just a testament to the people that are working on it.
Yeah. It's really focusing on the neurodivergent spaces, creating spaces for all.
Yeah.
And thinking the whole way through.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a really amazing way that you work with customers to kind of solve those problems. When you're thinking about space, there's a question of space versus place.
Mm.
Could you elaborate on what you think the difference is between space and place, square footage versus functional belonging, things like that?
I think space is just a unit of measure.
Okay.
At that point.
Yeah.
And I think it's quantitative. I think when you talk about place, people have to feel really good about being there. And they have to feel like whatever their function is for being in that space, they're going to be able to do it well, and do it comfortably. And what's interesting about it is you don't necessarily have to like what you see, but you have to be comfortable how you feel. And there's a difference between those two, right? If you don't like blue, fine, don't put blue in your house. Mm-hmm. But if I'm in a little phone room and the basis is blue, I'm not going to worry so much about that, because man, I'm sitting in a comfortable spot. It's quiet. The lighting is perfect. My technology works. I'm not distracted by anything. It's the same conversation as the AV that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. You're not going to worry about that it's blue. You're going to be impressed by the fact that everything else works so well. And I think it all has to be a reflection of a culture and an identity of the organization for whom you work. And there has to be an extension of that story that's being told. I think that's what makes a place.
Do you find that places have changed through this pandemic, through working from a third space, working from home? Do you see the place of now vastly different than the place of, let's say, 2018?
I think it's much more present. I think the variety is much more present. I think that pre-pandemic, it tended to be a bit more utilitarian. And now, because of how important wellness is as sort of a global term, not just relative to the pandemic, but that brought out a lot of other things relative to wellness and health. And so I think that feeling really good in a space became so much more important as a reaction to that. And so, yes, I think that when we do design them, I think that there are other layers that we need to put in, much more thought that we have to consider when we're designing them. So I would say that the variety of the spaces, even the quantity of the spaces, has increased.
The quantity of spaces has increased.
Those kinds of spaces, yeah.
Okay.
I think that in days prior, we were a little bit more focused on workstation, office, conference room, back of house sort of programmatic components. Now I think there's more leniency toward some of these third spaces and places that people are expecting. And whether you're doing it as a reaction to what employees expect, or you're doing it because you're forward thinking as an organization, it doesn't really matter. They're ending up there, and because they realize that that's what it takes, and that's what people expect if they're going to work there. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really interesting thing too, is that the leverage has sort of turned a bit.
It has, yeah.
So, well, not a bit. It's turned.
It's turned.
I'm minimizing it, but it's turned, and I think, we respond to that. Unfortunately, it's more fun for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think Chicago has embraced the fact that Class A spaces need to be a little bit different than perhaps they used to be. I've been in this industry long enough to remember everyone had the same workstation size and the same office, and it was beautiful, but it was monotonous in a way, that the creativity's there. What's one challenge you think you're going to be facing coming up here with space and design and how you approach the marketplace?
There's always the problem of getting as much into a floor plate as you can. And I think in a climate right now where people are looking at smaller amounts of space because people aren't there as much, and getting some of those places and doing placemaking, it gets a little tenuous because what happens if more people come in than you anticipate and someone doesn't have a place to sit? Or the place that they have to sit is not where they do their best work. So there's always this sort of gray area about the math, right? I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. And so that's a hard thing to do. But I feel like also there has to be a way to balance the kinds of places that people expect with the functional requirements that people need. And and whether it's remote work or whether it is even down to how long you can reserve a place. We're finding that too, is that a couple clients that we have right now have openly said, I don't want a place where someone's going to leave a workstation and go hole up in a phone room or a small conference room all day, and they just think it's their office, right? So you start to get to an interesting thing where there's behavioral modifications that companies have to start to examine, right? Like, okay, if you want a desk, if you're planning to come in, you got to fill out the reservation system, or you can only have this room for 2 hours. And I think that actually has started to help us a little bit, so that we have room for those third places that we all love to work on so much. We're going through that right now with a client where they've just said, how do we just keep people from doing that? And you say, you only make it available for 2 hours.
Well, technology helps too. I think technology is changing things, and we're on the cusp of the new AI, right? The big quantum campus might be coming to Chicago. Everything is going to adapt and change a little bit.
It's moderately terrifying.
It is a little, right? But I think the more we can embrace it and use the ability to create places that embrace it, we're going to be better off. Do you see a wide variety of technology coming into the spaces that you're creating? Do you see that AI influx at this point, or are we still just a little bit before the real rush?
No, a lot of AI. Yeah. And, we use AI to help with some renderings. Yeah. We use it as a tool. It's almost like a digital Pinterest board. We generate options and we generate look, feel, vibe. We don't use it with the intention of it being a final rendering.
Sure.
Right? Unless the architecture is final and we need something special, like we did one where it's run through AI and it looks kind of like a watercolor, so it doesn't feel so permanent, which is kind of interesting. But a lot of organizations are using AI. They're using it to write their documents, to check their documents, to do their research and things like that. So I think it's just really a question of how they use it. and what the best function is for it relative to their workflows. I think what's interesting about technology is that everyone just wants it to be easier. And AI may make it easier to accomplish tasks, but like when you go into a conference room, like we were talking about before, I just want to hit like 2 buttons and have it be done. That's where we need to pay attention is just the everyday user interface of it at that point. There are always going to be people that embrace it more than others and use it more than others. I think what's also interesting though is that we're running into situations where organizations are being very, very careful about which AI programs and applications they're using. And some of them will only allow, they'll only allow these 3 and we'll only have licenses for these 3. And so there's going to be great care relative to who gets to use what and how often. So I think we're still a little afraid of it. Have you seen The Mountainhead?
I have not.
It's that movie on HBO that the guy from Succession did.
Okay.
And it's
the big, like Steve Carell, right? I haven't seen it yet.
And
but
Jason Schwartzman and okay.
Good.
Yeah. But it's kind of eye-opening. And it's all centered around AI and these tech guys. And so again, moderately terrifying.
Okay. I'll have to check it out.
Check it out.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other challenges you think Chicagoland will face?
I think, again, just finding that balance between flexible working and being in the office is always going to be something that is a challenge, particularly now. But I will say, I was talking to somebody recently, and they brought up an interesting point. And I don't think this is original by any means, at least coming from my mouth. But I think a lot of workplaces have always been flexible. Like if you need to go do something, you can do it. What the fear is that the pendulum has swung a little too far the other way, so that flexibility now means you can be gone more than you can be in. And the exception rule kind of thing. The rule should be you come to the office. And the exception would be that you have to take care of some things and do what you need to do. And now it feels like the rule is, well, I can kind of come in when I want to come in. And then the exception is I'll be in the office. I think that's sort of at the heart of the challenge, is that we've got to find a way to find a better balance.
It's the office first, right? We used to be office first, and then we asked to go somewhere else or do something else.
Right.
And I think that's the perspective that a lot of companies are facing of how to get people to view it that same way. And, I think there's a wide variety of, like you said, is it the special type of coffee made in Colombia with only left-hand, gentlemen or ladies creating it? Maybe not. But it is having a different perspective, and place really, really can inspire that type of transition. There
is something that's interesting too, is that This actually arose out of doing some building repositioning work. And I worked with a client years ago that challenged us to figure out which amenities were the 10 that were required and the 10 that were going to be nice to have. And this was for a campus, a couple buildings.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that came out of that was another really good way to get people to come back to the office is to design the space so that it's suitable for community programs, for networking programs, social events, things like that, where people would enjoy being there. They would get something out of it. They felt like it wasn't just coming in to plop down at a desk and do their work, or to just even go into another room to do their work. There was something more meaningful about it that is going to help them, that's going to help their career, that's going to help their capabilities, all those kinds of things. And I think that's something that, and we're the past few law firms that I have worked on, that's been a huge component, is opening your space up so that you are able to welcome other people in, whether it's through your industry or whether it's through, I did one in Seattle where they were going to bring in, they brought kids in because they had this amazing art collection. And there's just an involvement there that I feel like is a really good way also to get people to come back.
Sure. Because
there's something in the mindset about, well, if I'm doing my work all day, what does it matter where I am? But if this is outside of that, and it's going to be important, and my manager's going to see me there, and that maybe this is something that I could use to increase my network and get promoted and all that kind of thing. There's something to that. So there's an incentive based beyond spatial design. There's incentive based with program and event design, which I think is kind of interesting.
Do you find that that's pushing you more into outdoor spaces than even ever before?
People love an outdoor space. The challenge in Chicago is that the amount of time you get to use it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of buildings already offer part of their amenities package. They have an outdoor space. So, but we have done private outdoor spaces that are next to an event space, a lounge space, a multi-purpose space, and things like that. And those are a lot of fun to work on. People love an outdoor space in Chicago when they can use it.
Absolutely.
It's hard to justify the expense when
it's a little challenging here.
When you only get it 3 or 4 months out of the year. Yeah.
But it's the best 3 or 4 months of any year.
I know.
What about sustainability? We've had a number of customers and different people coming out and saying that they're really not only wanting to be sustainable, but they're tracking down to net zeros. Are you seeing a lot of that in with your customers? Is that a big question on everyone's mind?
Net zero for interior projects is a little difficult. The scope and scale that you can affect, like we can't affect building systems very much, which would help. However, we have a really robust sustainability initiative, and we've got people in the office that are very passionate about it, and we do it stealth. Yeah. We're always we're doing it responsibly. I think people are rolling sustainability in with just wellness. So when they tell the story of recycled materials or locally sourced, or this was only transported from, 200 miles away and things like that, they're also rolling it into here we have these, these rooms that our team members can go in and work on their, have a moment, have a respite. Here's outdoor space, here's natural light. I think that's all kind of put in one package now. We do have some that are interested in having sustainability as an initiative. Once you get up to the certification levels, people look at the cost and they reevaluate sometimes. Some people are like, yeah, that's fine. We're going to do it. We want the plaque on the wall. Yeah. Some people are like, well, let's just get to the level. We can talk about it. Sure. But we don't need to spend the extra whatever it is to hang that thing on the wall. And but it's always there, and it should always be there. That's why we do the things that we do. So like we edit our library to have the most sustainably advantageous materials that we can have. And there are things that we won't use.
I feel like the new up and coming generation, the Zs as they enter the market or the workplace, are really focusing on that wellness, right? Whether it is sustainability or it's, wellness programs. Are there any other key attributes that you see that generation is looking for when they come into the office?
I just think authenticity.
Okay.
I think it's got to be clear, it's got to be clever, it's got to be easily discernible. It has to tell a story about the culture, it has to tell a story about the values, the mores and things like that. I think Gen Z is so, especially now because you read about how they're taking better care of themselves. Like they're not drinking, they're not going out and staying out late, right? They're very, very focused on this, and to create a space where they're reminded every day how they align with that space. I think that's just as important as providing, a respite room and an outdoor space and all those kinds of things that are about physical wellness. Sure. I think programs, I had a tech client that I worked with for a number of years that would implement, social and wellness programs, and whether it's massage suites in the space or sponsoring yoga classes or, being able to sign up for an athletic intramural team, all those kinds of things about getting yourself away for a little bit, rejuvenating so you can, but it is all to come back so you can be a better person to do the work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, let's not try to hide that. I think there's a lot that happens, but one of the things that I'm kind of excited about is to see program how people are going to introduce program to do some of those things. It might not be earth-shattering and so unique, but it's just one more thing that makes people feel good about sitting where they are.
Beyond the benefits package and the 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 5 we faced back in the day, those are those extra moments.
Yeah. Again, I worked a lot with a tech client, and this is sort of an extreme, but they had chefs, and they would use locally, organically raised food and prepare it, and they would serve lunch every day, and they were incredibly attentive to people's food aversions or allergies or things like that. And there was such an initiative around keeping people as healthy and happy as possible that it was worth it to them to go to that extent.
Wow.
A lesser extent would be a building selection that has responsible transportation, responsible food options and things like that, and being able to say, we did this. These are part of the reasons that we did this.
So you've created hotels. You must have had to put in a commercial kitchen for that customer. You've created outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, everything you can think of. What would you say was the most challenging thing to put in a space?
I would recommend not doing water features.
Water features.
I would recommend not doing that. I think that they're very expensive and they rarely work the way that you want them to.
So we are Hayworth, and Hayworth Showroom has a pool underneath it. Luckily, covered up right now, right? But I've always wondered if they'll ever bring that back. And you're saying no.
Well, I think it also depends on what you want it to do.
Sure.
So if you have like not to get too technical about it, but if you have a waterfall or constant movement, that's where it gets hard. If it's a reflecting pool, that's much easier.
So waterfalls are the problem.
Waterfalls.
Yeah.
So it just is, it's hard and it's expensive.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it, hire great consultants and make sure your contractor is just off the charts amazing.
Yeah. So no more waterfall features in your designs.
If a client asks for it, we'll do it.
You'll do it. Okay,
we'll
good.
Do it.
And we've got the right consultants and you know exactly what you're doing now. And all right, so when BOS wants to put in the waterfall, we know who to call. Okay.
You can do that. I can do that.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time today.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This was great. I learned a lot, and I think that you guys are really making impacts, not only in Chicagoland, but it sounds across the country.
Yeah, we are. I think that the network that IA has across the country and the geographies that it occupies are in really good spots, and the work that gets produced is just really good.
Yeah.
It's just really good. And our thought leadership programs and our mentorship initiatives and things like that are all designed to get the right people that are passionate about doing the right thing, which is making really great stuff with really great people. And I think that matters a lot. I think that to be able to have so many resources from a design perspective is really good.
It's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.